still watching Plus TV, and this is our election studio. The Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, SERAP, has pushed for the scrapping of security votes and immunity for presidents, vice presidents, state governors, and deputy state governors. SERAP said candidates for the forthcoming presidential elections should commit to scrapping security votes, spending by presidents and state governors by repealing the constitution to include specific prohibition of security votes. Will this be effective is the question that we'll be asking. Will these governors allow it? We have Segun Awosanya joining us again, and Shola Ogun, I beg your pardon, Babasola Adebiyi. He is actually a Guber candidate with YPP in Ogun State. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, David.
Now, for the average man on the street who's watching this conversation, first and foremost, when we are talking about security votes, some people might wonder, what is this exactly? And what are these allocations supposed to be used for in proper terms?
Well, first of all, it's something that tends to be a provision for the coordination and organization of security within the state. Because you say that the captain or the chief security officer of every state is the governor. But most of the time when you ask this question, governors will tell you they don't control the police. Then you begin to ask, what exactly is the security vote for? And when you probe further, you realize that the security vote is such that nobody understands what it's for. Nobody gets to ask or demand for the accountability of such, and they are not even legally, positioned.
And this money is running to billions, because let's look at a couple of statistics now. Imo State had 4 billion per year. Enugu has roughly about 600 million per year. We look at Lagos State as well, 17.149 billion annually. Borno State, 9.675 billion as well annually. Now, how can you say you can't trace or you can't tell how these monies are spent or this provision's been made for to cater for security? And if the state government is not in charge of the police, then why is it being released to them in the first place?
I think these are some of the perks of the office of governors in Nigeria.
Yeah, at the expense of who?
Of course, at the expense of the people who don't realize their political will and their position in a democracy to ask questions. Because it is your question that begins to create the need to repeal and replace most of these archaic laws that is not benefiting society. How can we be fighting corruption when we have some allocated funds that are not accountable? So these are questions we need to ask ourselves. When we have the police imbroglio of the past few years, governors, there's no single governor, apart from, I think, some in the north or one or two in the north, who spoke against police brutality, especially as it applies into their state. They kept mum because nobody wants to speak against anything that will affect that windfall, that sum that they use to populate their war chest towards perpetuating themselves in office. So these are the issues that we have been recycling with, for generations, and I hope we don't leave this as a legacy for our children.
You are running for governorship. Obviously, this falls on your lap, whether you like it or not. They want to know. People who are watching right now want to know, why are security votes not accounted for? SERAP is saying scrap it because we think that these monies are being abused. If you're only a chief security officer by name and you have no control of the security apparatuses within your domain, why do you need the money? Put it somewhere else.
Actually, as far as I'm concerned, security vote is unquestionable legal way of governors enriching themselves. We've seen a situation whereby the first thing any governor does once they have the allocation from the federal government is to take out the security votes. There is a particular former governor who said he has not received any salary throughout his tenure for a good 8 years. But this is a governor that once the allocation lands, the first thing is to remove 500 million naira per month for the security votes. Now, the question is this: is it legal? Is it accountable? Can we actually trace it? Are they transparent about it? No. And it shouldn't be.
Then what does the Constitution say about this money? And why aren't we having prosecutions for all of these funds?
There are arguments that it is somewhat legal, but it is a transfer from the military era into a democratic dispensation.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, the Constitution, I've not read it anywhere in the Constitution where it is stated about the security vote. And what even determines the security vote?
Well, they say it depends on what your state needs in terms of...
Yes, it depends on the security level.
Kidnapping, robbery,
pipeline vandalism,
kidnapping,
Boko Haram. No, it's the truth. And unrest within the state are some of those things that determines what is being allocated to a particular state. You get, but the question now is, what rate? I know you get it from the federal allocation. Does the governor determine it, or the RMF revenue mobilization and allocation for fiscal determines it? No, nobody knows. As far as I'm concerned, what I think the federal government or the National Assembly should do is to make it more transparent. You need security vote. There is no way you don't need a security vote, because there is no way you can rule out criminal unrest in the state. So, as a governor, you are the first chief security officer of the state. And the question now is, you can't just wait for the National Assembly, for the national federal government or the Inspector General, because the truth is, at the state level, the governor does not have right over the commissioner of police.
Well noted, but I would like to have your thoughts now, Segun. Serap says, well, we have to get illegal action from the Minister of Justice to ensure that these funds are held onto, shut down, held, put aside for a while, and let's see what exactly these monies have been spent, the security votes. Now, do you think we would see this move see the light of day, and do you think any prosecution will come from how well these monies have been spent? Because if we are supposed to be accountable to the people, then there's no shortcut.
Okay, we must understand one thing, that in Nigeria we have lost the will, or we have lost the ability to feel empathetic towards things that doesn't affect us directly. So to be able to make this work, we need political will. We need the people's voice behind this. NSAS worked because we have overwhelming people, discontent, groundswell of dissent here and there, and government needed to act. But on security votes, it sounds very academic to a lot of people. They don't even know what it is. They don't know how it affects them until you begin to tie it to things that is personal to them. So without that, it is just a pronouncement. It is just an effort in futility, because no government will rise up. Just like police will not reform itself. No government will rise up and slash security vote, or no government or no legislation will slash security votes, because most of them were former governors, and they are using the National Assembly as their resting place. Most of them are still looking forward to come back and govern, and that security vote of a thing has become one of the things that instrument used to return to power. So they are not going to work on it unless there is the will of the people behind it. So how do we get enough people to understand the implication of this windfall to government who are not responsible to us? So it depends on how we couch the information, how we couch the advocacy, how we couch the enlightenment process that will make people understand the implication of this on them.
But even if people don't understand, don't you think that Serap would make any headway with this push calling on the Ministry of Justice?
You see, that, like I said, there are two different ways in which things work in Nigeria. Anything that you do without
at least to have investigation go on.
See, look, when it comes to policy making, when it comes to investigation, we are very good at this thing, and it will die off over time. The president, when he was having an interview during one of those the candidates or so, when they were telling him about how local governments were stealing money, how governors were stealing money, what did he say? He said, the people should scream. He said the people should scream, meaning he understands the impact of political will. If there is chaos all over the place and we're saying end security votes, and we're saying we're ready to die here today, we're ready to sleep on the street, we're ready to shut down bridges until government shut down the
Do we have that willpower?
Because exactly, because we don't feel the empathy.
The truth is, we're quick to shout because one or two persons around close to us have been affected, but then when we say, let's all come together, let's band together and hit the streets, we don't come out. So do we see that even working anytime soon?
Well, I'm not saying that working anytime soon. We're Nigerians. In the past, we shout, we scream.
I mean, Nigerian too.
Just in case.
We shout, we scream. We go on social media, we do all sorts of things. At the end of the day, call Nigerians out. Let's take this thing. Let's lead this thing. Maybe going to the National Assembly. Let's do the right thing. Most people will withdraw.
Now, in stating how security votes are supposed to be spent, according to what I read, state governors and presidents are advised to use discretion while disbursing or spending these funds. But the question is, who checks, who has oversight functions as to how these monies are spent? Because I can say, take this cup, wash it very well, and make sure that it is clean. I don't want to see any water on it. But if I don't watch over how you wash it, I can't tell if it's really clean. So why do we not, first and foremost, have someone or a department, I don't know, watch over how these monies, look at books if there be any, to trace how these monies are disbursed or spent before we even go to the point where we say scrap it? That should be a thought, an afterthought that comes after we say, okay, we've looked at the books, these monies are not being spent properly, so we want to put an end to it. Maybe this might teach you a lesson. Why don't we start from there?
Exactly, that's exactly the point I was trying to make. First of all, we need to make it transparent. If you understand what the security vote is being used for, if we hold the government responsible, if everybody knows how it's being disbursed, what determines it, then after that, we can now decide on whether to scrap it or not.
No, but the question Marianne is asking is that what structure should we have in place
The approach is this.
to have
The simple approach is
transparency?
Whatever it is you want to change, it starts from legislation. So the National Assembly should have an oversight committee on this to review or to raise a bill on the restructuring of this security vote. Now, with that in place, we can now know or have the basis to engage and question. And how do we question? We must fuse activism with advocacy. We don't always have to hit the street and burn tires before we make our impact felt. We can always spell out the things that we hope to see as a people who, as governors, we expect governors to give account to us. And they match to us and say, these are the terms that we're looking at. And these are the suggestions that we have. Or these are the recommendations that we have. They will put it into consideration and then begin to use that as a basis to question what we're asking.
But for a second, do you think that these politicians have a very strong understanding that there's not going to be any will from the people anytime soon, because there's no understanding of what the security votes are, talk less of pushing and amassing that will?
People don't do what you expect, they do what you inspect. If the National Assembly knows that the people will rise up about any matter, because we are the one that determines if they return or not. So they will do it. NSAS was not something that from the beginning, was going to succeed, because people feel, how do we build that security, political will, enough for people to face somebody holding a gun that have been reported to have been killing people before. But we did it because we're able to engage across spectrum. The people carry them along to understand the implication. The government, the arms of government, and the legislature themselves, they know the implication of these things. So, and that's how it works. And we have to use, and it's a template for every single thing that we want to change, for every single law we need to fix. None of you are using the phones you had 10 years back. You have upgraded. How come our laws are not being upgraded? Because the law must mirror society. And so from what we have now, our laws are one way and society is another way. So we shouldn't have that. No progressive nation prosper without strong institution. An institution gets strengthened when there are people who know what should be and ask questions, the right questions.
I think I want to go back to David's question. There are plenty Nigerians, many Nigerians who somewhat don't even care about the gibberish that we're speaking right now. All they care about is their food, let us eat. How do I benefit from this? So again, could the reason for us not being so involved in stuff like this, we might not know that it's affecting us, but it is affecting us. Could it also be because there is no awareness out there? Nigerians are not, I don't want to say we are somebody somewhere is trying to keep this information from us, but we're also not necessarily interested in governance until it's election season. What do we do to get past that ignoramus state, in our lives? Because whether we like it or not, if we're concerned, if we want to learn, we would have that information at our disposal.
I think the right question should be, what do I do? We should stop using the word we. Because when you say we, nobody takes responsibility.
Yeah.
So we need to begin to take responsibility. What am I doing to create awareness enough for people to know
awareness,
the
we are
implication of
having this conversation and we are bringing it to the world.
That's what I'm saying. So we need to begin to take individual responsibility. People watching at home, how do I begin to let people around me know that security implication does not discriminate whether you are fair, black, Muslim, Christian, rich, or poor? Anybody can be shot at any time. We are a hashtag away, from being, so if we understand this and we know that people, the chief security officer of our state, don't care if we live or die. Of course, we are all alive.
But, interestingly, there were reactions from 36 state governors asking for an increase in security votes. And one of it just rang a funny little bell in my head. Serap is calling for a total scrap, and then the governors are saying, we need more money, we need these votes increased. Are you surprised by this response or reaction from governors? We haven't yet even pushed for it to be scrapped, and they're calling for more.
Because the manner or the approach by which we're asking for the scrapping, is too academic. It is too academic. It's like it's one of those things you want to see in the front of newspaper without an action to go by. Before we went to National Assembly, we have already galvanized the people. We have already enlightened the people. There's already a movement on ground showing the implication, showing the lapses, showing the gaps that people can relate with. So when we went to NAS, we're not representing an organization, we're representing the people. In fact, till today, nobody knows the correct name of the organization that, galvanized the movement for NSAS Reform Police NG, which is very key, which is exactly the way things should be. So Seraph should probably go back to the drawing board and find a way of carrying Nigerians along to know the implication enough for us to have ownership in that advocacy.
Mr. Adebiyi.
What I think is this, in respect of Serap, I agree with him of going back to the people. You don't just organize meeting and call people to sit down, or the journalists sit down, this is what we want the government to do, this is what we are asking for. What I believe, as he said, is go back to the people, orientate people, let the people understand. The truth is this, the people has the power if they want to make changes. But it's just unfortunate that most people don't know they have that power. So we need to orientate them. We need to let them have that understanding of what security vote is all about, what it should be and what is not. So for the governor that are asking for an increment, of course, what do you expect? That is the way one of the ways they make their money without anybody asking them how they spend the money. So someone collecting 500 million naira every month is asking for additional 200 million naira. I've come out to tell you that, no, I've not been collecting salary. You asking what...
And we say there is no money in the system. Now, exactly. You are running under the party YPP. Now, one of the calls from Serap as well is that upon 100 days of assumption into office, we need to see the immunity clause of 308 of the 1999 Constitution being removed. What's your take on that?
And removing the immunity clause is just a way of causing distraction. What I believe is, instead of removing the immunity clause, let investigation be ongoing. Let investigation be ongoing.
Detail for what's going on in America right now?
Exactly. Let the investigation be ongoing. Pile up the investigation, whatever fact you have, pile it up. When you have enough fact, then you cannot take it to the to the State Assembly or the National Assembly, as the case may be. Let them review it. Then the National Assembly or the State Assembly can now take decision on whatever report that is being given to them. Then from there, the National Assembly, maybe National Assembly or the State Assembly can call for impeachment of the governor or whatever. But investigation must go on. Do not remove the immunity clause because it's going to cause a lot of distraction.
Segun.
Well, I agree with him to an extent, but I just believe that what we're striving to achieve here is transparency, accountability, and belief in government. The people must be able to own the governance. to be able to understand their role in governance, so that the government themselves, the politicians themselves, don't see themselves as demigods, who are meant to dish out whatever they want to the people. There must be a union. The gap between the governed and the governors, or the government, must be closed, to the point where there is, harmony. So without harmony, there's disorder. Without disorder, there's chaos. So that's exactly what is going on now. So I believe that the immunity clause should be left, but thorough investigation must go on. Thorough investigation must be carried on, and then probably to a measure whereby once we have enough.
How do we now have this thorough investigation? Because something's just ringing in my mind. The Nigerian factor will always play in.
Strengthening of the institutions. Institutions must be independent.
In the short term, do you see that happening?
In the short term, we see the first thing that needs to happen is for us to enlighten Nigerians, to be able to have a new breed of citizens that are easy to rule, easy to govern, difficult to rule, impossible to enslave.
Who will now be responsible for this whole
We all have to take responsibility.
Again, because the Nigerian factor he's referring to obviously is, oh, it's my brother. Oh, this is a witch hunt. Oh, you're trying to take us down when it was your turn, Because we know how divided we are. And every time you take a step, there's a preemption or second guessing that you're up to something because this person that is in power is not your brother, or you're not benefiting. We need to first break that jinx. We need to begin to blur those lines, I'm guessing, before we even get beyond to where you're talking about.
To do that, we just need to find common grounds. For example, there's nothing we can agree on this seat, except I begin to mention something that is common between us. There will always be diversity, but what joins us together? Our children, our loved ones, the kind of future, the kind of legacy we want to leave behind for our children, for coming generation. And that's what is key, because we already agree on the fact that we're not going to live forever. So if we're going to die and leave all the things that we've been striving to get for some people, what kind of world or society are we leaving behind for them? And that's what should be paramount when we're coming together to make these rules, not because of people who are living now perishing by the day. So these are the key things. Look into the eyes of your children and ask yourself if this is the kind of country you want to live for them.
And as we're counting down to the elections, we'll also be looking into the eyes of the politicians and ask, is this the democracy we deserve? Many thanks, Segun Awosanya, convener of NTAS, as well as Babasola Adebiyi, gubernatorial candidate under the platform YPP. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for being here. We'll take another break now. We'll be back with the news update. Stay with us.